All right, T, so let's get into it. There's some more comments coming from Vrabel's way. Ones that I liked. More on free agency for him. Asked about the aggression we'll see from the Patriots in free agency. Here's what Mike Vrabel had to say.
Hopefully aggressive. I mean, we want to be aggressive. We want to target players that we feel like are going to help us. They're going to be outstanding players. They're going to be outstanding additions to the locker room and the community. And if that all fits and the compensation fits, but I'm confident that we'll be aggressive. We've started some of those discussions internally. And I think having different plans and having an option A and option B, I mean, things are going to change. Everybody's looking at the same players. So we have to be ready to pivot and adjust and have a vision for each player, I would say, at each level. I mean, there's going to be this high level that things are going to get done very quickly. That'll transition then to, maybe just some mid-range dollars, and then obviously you look at opportunity. So free agency gets broken down into, compensation, and then it gets broken down into opportunity. And I feel like we're in a position to offer both as far as compensation and opportunity for some of these players.
They got the long bankroll.
Love that.
You know what I like, though? He talked about the pivot. Because right now the big fish out there is Ronnie Stanley for anyone needing a left tackle.
Yes.
Here's what Eric DaCosta, longtime general manager of the Ravens, had to say. Never want to say I'm 100%, but I feel good about coming to an extension agreement with Ronnie Stanley. Met with his agent, and I will meet with his agent in Indy this week, and I'm optimistic we'll have a deal done. John Harbaugh, head coach of the Ravens.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably keep Ronnie. I'm hopeful that we will. End quote. He said some more if we don't have an option.
Yeah.
But that's what these guys are.
Yep.
And so there's a part of hopefully aggressive so we get the big fish. And if we whiff and the line snaps and we can't get him, if we can't get a Ronnie Stanley, 6'6", 315, will be 32 years old at the new league year.
Yep.
What do we go with the guy what's the backup if we don't land the guy that's had almost 7,000 career snaps at left tackle? That's Patrick McCarry, who in the last season alone played left tackle, right tackle, and left guard for the Ravens. All right, if it's not them two, is it possible that an Alaric Jackson's out there? Is it Cam Robinson, the forgotten guy in all of this?
That's
Again,
right,
get the best five up there.
Yep.
And also to be aggressive, where Mike Vrabel wants to go into the draft with a set line above, okay, we can play with these guys. Now let's fill out the rest with the draft, which is what the Commanders did. Is there a Jedrick Wills, who would be a backup left tackle? Look at the guard spots, Trav. Trey Smith, Will Freeze coming off a broken tibia. I don't know how much. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, he had the broken tibia. There's James Daniels who tore his Achilles. That's a thing of you got to be aggressive to get Trey Smith, because let's look at Ronnie Stanley. You miss on him, you get Patrick McCarry, and then there's a draft. You miss on Trey Smith, you have a right guard coming off a broken leg, or you have a right guard in James Daniel coming off a torn Achilles.
Yep.
Your priority has to be Trey Smith. You can't miss on him. And keep in mind, you have Mike Onwenu, but he can play left. He can play right tackle. And then even think of the wide receivers. Is that being overly aggressive, going and trading for a DK Metcalf or a T. Higgins? And if that trade doesn't work, Nick Westbrook-Akine and Darius Slayton. Being aggressive, because that's 1 and 2 on your priority list.
Yeah.
And your wide receiver 1 this year doesn't have to be your wide receiver 1 the next year. Because keep in mind, all the talk about T. Higgins, he was in that 2020 draft class with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
The next year they got Jamar Chase.
Right.
It's a long rebuild. He spoke about that. Hopefully aggressive.
Aggressive.
That's him coming out. Hopefully we're aggressive.
Yeah.
Now that's where Merck's it a little bit of. Hopefully. Mike Vrabel, you're running the show. You got your boy Ryan Cowden in the room too.
Well, I think it just means he doesn't want to do anything stupid. Like, I mean, if the Bengals franchise tag T. Higgins and you trade for T. Higgins, that's stupid. Okay, I'm sorry. I said that from the beginning, George. They franchise tag him, I'm out on T. Higgins for another year. I mean, maybe next offseason we can have these same discussions. But if you go trade for him, that's stupid. I'm not going to call it stupid to trade for a DK Metcalf. I'll knock it down a notch and call it dumb, because I do think, you don't have to force a wide receiver 1 in an offseason where there's not a ton of them. Like, there's no market. Teams are not letting these guys go. Now, when you start talking left tackle, that's a different situation. You are so desperate right now, today, that you will have to overpay. So I think hopefully aggressive means just that, George.
Yeah.
I think the hopeful in front of aggression is we're not going to do anything stupid, but hopefully we can be aggressive in a smart way. And I do. So that's how I took it. And I agree with him wholeheartedly. And we're going to get into all these sound bites. And I know you nerd out over this stuff, but so do I. Because I just think we're getting more clarity to all the topics you and I talk about every day. He is painting a picture for us. And he's smart. Let's just turn back the clock one off season, shall we? Remember when you and I talked about and dissected and broke down the quote that said, yeah, I mean, we're going to burn some cash, baby. Woo! What?
Yep.
So now we're getting a measured
burn some cash
approach.
Professional.
Hopefully aggressive.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like saying cautiously optimistic. I still hear optimistic. I hear optimism in there, but I hear cautiously. So I get it. That's what I think he's doing here, George. I really do. By the way, I'm just reading an article. I want to take you into this because you and I are always open and honest and transparent with each other. I'm reading a story right now that I just don't like, that Trey Smith is the betting favorite to go to the Chicago Bears, and the Bears are dropping, hopefully, and just being aggressive in trying to get him. So, again, I bring that up because that's what Vrabel's saying. Like, a lot of these guys, we're going to lose to other highest bidders, other teams. We got to make decisions that are smart for the Patriots long-term, too. So I kind of get it. Hopefully aggressive does not really sound off any red flags or anything to me. I agree with him.
But if you have the most cap space in the NFL, how can there be a highest bidder?
I know.
And I did say this last show that we could see a Trey Smith go to the Bears because they need a guard.
Well, right.
And the Bears could be a trade back spot if they want to get aggressive and go up to 4.
There's going to be other teams involved in all these guys,
right?
But
that goes to what we opened up with the overspending.
Yeah.
Because, look, with Trey Smith, you're getting 6'6", 320, 26 years old at the start of the league year. 4-year starter for the Chief, good on the interior. Their interior pocket was fine.
Yes.
The tackles stunk.
Yeah.
In 3,500 career pass blocking snaps with the Chiefs, he only allowed a pressure on 5% of those pass blocking snaps. A pressure, not a sack.
Right.
Pressures do a lot to a quarterback. This is what the reality is, and this is what the overspending is. You can look at the market, say whatever you want. This contract for Trey Smith. And also, who put out that report?
Right.
Trey Smith's agent?
Yeah.
Bears are willing to be the highest bidder. Well,
Facts.
The Patriots are going, no, we will. Because they know that he can drive up the guard market from the highest it is right now. I believe it's $102 million total value to 105, 107, perhaps maybe even 110.
Goodness.
What is the fully guaranteed? Because same thing, he's going to become the highest paid guard in the history of the NFL. And the Patriots need it. Now, do they meet with him and go, you've only played right guard. Can you play left?
Right.
Do they go to Mike Onwenu? Who, by the way, Elliot Wolf did say last offseason, well, we got the best tackle out there on the market, which Mike Onwenu was in free agency. And again, that speaks to that these great tackles just don't hit the open market. But do you go to Mike Onwenu, who is making a good chunk of change? Hey, we're going to move you to the left side because the guy we just paid more money than you is going to be playing on the right side. And is Mike Onwenu up for that? But that's where the dominoes fall. I don't want to hear if they lose someone to the highest bidder. You are the highest bidder. You walk into that room with $50 million more than anybody else in the league to spend. And guess what? If it's not the best at the receiving room, but you still have to block up front, you have to make that happen.
Yes.
Because that's what it comes into. And let's get into it. Another one he talked about. Great question here. How does he plan to support Drake May?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, again, I think you always talk about being able to protect them. You have to be able to have some guys that can help them on the edges and be able to make contested catches. And you don't have to be perfect, right? You don't have to have, perfect ball placement, right? And those are all things that we talk about, trying to support Drake, believing that he is the future of our franchise at quarterback, and been able to meet with him and talk with him and just get to know him as a person. But you have to look at the lines of scrimmage, and you look no further than the Super Bowl game where that game was clearly won at the line of scrimmage.
Hear that?
Yep.
Talking Super Bowl, ball placement doesn't have to be perfect. And he said this from the get-go. He's like, I want a guy that gets separation, but I want a guy that's good with contested catches. Hello, Ted McMillan.
That's right.
Bell going off for a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah. He'd be my guy if he was second rounder. Jaden Higgins, though, that's a guy that does that. Go watch his tape on playing Iowa State. let's start with helping him on the edge. I mean, he's talking wide receiver. Who can help him on the edge? DK Metcalf, 6'4", 230. Will be 27 years old at the start of this upcoming season.
What do you have to give up? That's my only thing.
Yeah, I get you. Okay. But then here's the realistic part of it too then. Weak free agency wide receiver in class. You're going to have to overspend again.
Right.
If you walk away with, I'll keep mapping this out, with your wide receiving room looking like Darius Slayton, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Pop Douglas, rookie wide receiver, Jalen Polk.
Yeah.
And one of those rooks could be a Jaden Higgins, Xavier Restrepo, Jack Besh, Jalen Noel. Guys that can line up in the slot and be effective there in a Jacoby Myers role, right? If one of those rookies is that and then the other one's a project, then that's fine. You live with that. Because that's where it has to begin, where there's going to be overspending. It's going to be a multi-year rebuild, and he doesn't want it to take long. But there's being realistic with the talent you're going to get. And let's face it, this roster is bad. Like, the coaching was terrible, Trev. They would go out there on Sundays, and I would go, what is being taught? Everyone would. What's being taught to these guys from Wednesday to Saturday leading up to the game Sunday?
Right.
What is being coached to them that they look lost? And in game management, they weren't given a chance. But the roster also wasn't the best. And he said, we're going to have a vastly different looking roster. That's a reality.
Yeah.
That's a support on the edges. Because also, when you look at a Slayton and Westbrook-Akine, they're two of the better receivers in the NFL in tight window throws. They're not the best at separation, but they're good at contested catches. And they're good after the catch. And that matters too.
Well, look, some of this too is why I said nothing against the DK Metcalf thing. I need to know the price to this.
Yeah,
I don't want
to
I don't want to give up too much draft capital for DK Metcalf. And look, I think, and I'm going to say this term again, I think you could kick the can down the road as it pertains to a true knockdown, drag out wide receiver one. Some of those names you mentioned, whether it's a couple rookie guys you take late, whether it's Jalen Polk, young receiver who still needs to develop, even Pop Douglas, who's still developing. And you brought up the coaching. I think that's a good aspect of this, of Vrabel, McDaniels, and crew. What can you get out of these guys that Gerard Mayo and his staff failed to do? Someone is going to emerge here.
Yeah.
If it's more than one guy, even better. But from your current wide receiver room, someone's going to emerge. Maybe there's another gear to Pop Douglas, who we all like. Maybe you're right. I know you're high on Jalen Polk. You keep telling me this guy's going to work out eventually. Yeah. Maybe he will. But at some point, or maybe you're drafting late, you're getting a receiver in here who can play, and we're like, oh, this guy can play. But that receiver wouldn't have worked in the Mayo world, right? But it could work in the Vrabel McDaniels world. So that's why I think you can kick the can for another offseason down the road and figure out a wide receiver one. Yeah. You cannot do that when it comes to the offensive line. And we all know it, and Vrabel just said it. That's where you can be aggressive. Yeah. That's where I do agree with you. I don't want to hear highest bidder stuff on that offensive line, okay? Yeah. Receivers, if Slayton gets into a bidding war, I'm out on that. I'm sorry. But at the same time, if I can get my offensive line fortified this offseason, overpaying or not, cool. We can figure out wide receiver one down the road. And by the way, the wide receivers you do have on the roster could be enhanced just by the player development and the coaching that they're getting.
It's a simple fact of they're going to go into this. Yeah, I'm not going to give up on Jalen Polk. I think he just lost his confidence. Yeah. Right? And I'm not, if he's a good wide receiver 3 eventually, then cool.
Great.
Don't love it. You burned that second-round pick.
Yeah. But it's something. You're getting nothing now.
Yeah. It could have been a McConkey. It could have even been a Xavier Legette. But, whatever. Think about it like this, too, Trav. At 4, and we had our friend of the show, Matt Miller, on. Check out the older episodes of Foxborough Rush, by the way, too. Once you're done with this one, Matt Miller hopped on the show last week to talk about what the Patriots should do at 4. Yep. And what did he point out? He goes, before I get to draft day, I'm out in Indy, and I am blowing smoke up everyone's. Hey, a lot of teams are calling. Yeah. I heard someone's going to move up. Yep. I heard someone's going to take Shador Sanders at 3. Mm-hmm. And that causes that rush of teams wanting to trade up and get a Shador. Or causing teams want to see what it takes to move up to 4. And if you get a team, Trav, let's look at it like this. A team that moves up enough to get up to 4 to get the player they want. Let's say it's a quarterback.
Yeah.
What was the A.J. Brown trade? It was the 18th overall pick because the Eagles had 2 first-round picks in that draft.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes and I mapped it out. Again, older episode of Foxborough Rush. Check it out. When T. Higgins was tagged, we all had our moment, right? I spoke from the heart for 7 minutes. This is how it goes down. You're not going to get those guys that hit the open market. If you want to trade for a T. Higgins who's franchise tagged, that's going to take 2 firsts.
Yeah, don't do that.
I don't want that.
No.
But if you have 2 first-round picks in next year's draft with the Pats, Trav, that's your plan. And I see it.
Yeah.
Offensive line this draft.
Yes.
You're going to pay for someone. You need to sign a veteran receiver and draft.
Yeah.
And then next draft, when you have 2 first-round picks, let's say.
There you go.
Or a bevy of picks.
There you go.
Depending where you're picking. Because let's also face it. Let's say
it could be a better receiver draft.
Let's say the Patriots fall to like 18, right?
Right.
Next year's draft. Let's say they're picking around 18, 20.
Sure.
And there is a receiver on the market. And now you have me thinking for a later episode.
Yeah.
Right? Who are the targets next offseason? We'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
And it's the DK Metcalf argument for a second-round pick. Mm-hmm. Who is better that you're going to get in the second round than DK Metcalf? No one.
No one.
And that's
fine
what it
with
would
that
be.
Price.
Right, but that's what it would be next year in the first to get an elite one.
Sure.
And all this argument could go away if they trade a second and a fourth for DK Metcalf, extend him, overpay him to a bit, and then trade back from 4 to 7, reaccrue a second-round pick, and then boom, they still have a top 10 pick. They got a second. They have their elite receiver 1. We could see what they happen at top 10. There's just multiple options at that.
It is.
For him to just straight up say, I got to help him on the outside and I got to block for him up front, that's what you want, man. You know what I loved about this T, all in all?
Yeah.
He had an actual plan.
Yes.
He had actual ideas.
A common sense plan, too.
That's a guy that spoke for 15 minutes, went up, said, I don't got an opening statement. Karen Garigian, what do you got? Let me pick you out right now. Let's go.
That's right.
Boom. Let's get going.
Yep. Yeah.
And he had answers for everything. Even the, hey, why do you have this title on your staff? And why do you have such a big staff? And we'll get into all that. But he had an answer for everything. That's what I loved.
I know we're going to talk defense here with Terrell Williams, but, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying here, I bring Terrell Williams up because sometimes defense is your best offense.
Yeah.
And so this could be, going back to the big picture off season, George.
Yeah.
Instead of overpaying or overreaching for a wide receiver 1, I'm using air quotes because outside of T. Higgins, who the hell is it? And you are overpaying and overreaching for anyone else, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you punt on that, pun intended, and you focus on offensive line, which he's telling you, and we all know you got to do, and defense, George, let's say defensive side of the ball. Well, all of a sudden, you are much better in the trenches on both sides, offensive and defensive line.
Yeah.
You got a shutdown corner back there in Christian Gonzalez, who just showed you, oh, yeah, baby, I can stay healthy. Yep. Okay? So now all of a sudden, if you can improve that offensive line via free agency, via draft, and defense via free agency and draft, I mean, life's a lot easier for everyone. Drake May, you're taking more pressure off of these young receivers to continue to develop. Yeah. I get there's no stud, but still, your defense is keeping you in games. Your offensive line's protecting your young stud quarterback. You're going to win games. And then you go in the next offseason with a much clearer vision. Okay, we solidified offensive line. We solidified our defense. Drake May had another year of development. Working in now we have year 2 of Drake May and McDaniel's system, but he's year 3 in the league. Let's go get him. Insert name here. Whether it's draft, we don't know. Next season's draft class at wide receiver may be better, George. Free agent class maybe. Let's go get him a true number 1 receiver, or let's go get him 2 wide receivers. Whatever it takes. You see, so this offseason could just be focusing on offensive line and defense, and then next offseason you can recalibrate and worry about the wide receiver. And I'm fine with that plan.
The first offseason under a new head coach and a new front office, which this is, even though it's the same names, you have to reset it because you have to undo. And keep in mind, too, man.
That's true.
All right, so this year it'll be Josh McDaniels as offensive coordinator.
Right.
The year before him was Alex Van Pelt. Wow,
that's
right. Blanked out on his name.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. We all want to forget about
That's
it.
an okay blank out.
Year before that was Bill O'Brien with one hand tied behind his back because Bill Belichick reportedly didn't trust him. That's coming from me, not from B.O.B. The only assistant he was given was an assistant tight ends coach. Like, says a lot.
Yeah,
Before Bill O'Brien was Matt Patricia.
Oh, God.
Before Matt Patricia was Josh McDaniels. So,
That's right.
you're bringing back that OC, but this is about to be a 5th different offensive coordinator in 5 seasons.
Goodness.
And every year you take one away, you have to reset that roster the following year because a new guy comes in. Once McDaniels left and a Matt Patricia comes in, Matt's going, I want this type of receiver here. I like this guy. I like that.
Right.
Then Bill O'Brien comes in and goes, I hate that receiver. I need this receiver here.
Absolutely.
Then Alex Van Pelt comes in. Well, I don't like this offensive lineman. I'm switching up from power run to a more of a zone gap scheme. Okay. And that's what goes down. So, yes, it's going to take a year. And Trav, too, because I said it, and you know what? I can't hold off on it. But here are the guys that will be pending free agents next offseason.
Okay.
And this is what makes sense because teams will either make the choice. Do we want to extend them or do we trade them
Right.
and then reset the cost control window that we have? Drake London, Rashid Shaheed, Garrett Wilson, which you'd have to really trade a lot because it's in the division.
Yeah.
Chris Olave. Like, those are just the top names that jump off the page.
Better
to
than
me.
this class.
Exactly. And even think about, though, you have the pending of like a Jawan Jennings, who'd be a vet, always productive with the Niners.
Yeah.
And that's a guy you could trade for a lot cheaper. But like that's the different ways to improve the roster where they can go right now. Hey, let's take it easy. We're going to get DK. Let's sign this guy.
Yep.
Next year, let's get some first. Let's figure out the draft assets. Let's see where we are. Let's trade for a Drake London, which I don't think would happen if the Falcons figure it out with Michael Penix. But you get what I'm saying.
All right, I want to play your game. Here's the wide receivers in next year's draft. As of now, Denzel Boston, wide receiver, Washington,
Yep.
6'4", 210, just how you like him, 4'4", 40.
Yep.
Could we use that around here? Not yes, but hell yeah. Clemson, Antonio Williams, shorter guy, George, 5'11", 190, 4'4". Nick Anderson, LSU, 6'4", 210, another clone, 4'5", so a little slower, but a big guy, LSU wide receiver, need I say more. There's an Alabama guy here. I mean, the wide receiver class, now we'll see. We got to let college football play out, right? But just in a quick glance, George, before we take deep dives and start breaking these guys down next offseason, right? I mean, the top guys I just gave you were 6'4", 210 and could run like the wind. So I'm just saying, between free agency and draft next year, it's not loser mentality to think, well, we can't get a guy this season. So, no, I'd rather you not force it. Just improve. There's enough holes on the damn roster anyway. Offensive line being the main one. Improve there. Improve defensively. Just improve the roster. Improve, period. And then you can figure out wide receiver next year. I don't think that's some hot take from you and I. I think that's smart, and it sounds like that's where Vrabel is.
Carnell Tate, 6'3", chain mover out of Ohio State. You know, we like those Ohio State receivers.
Right.
Put on some pounds on them, get them to bulk up, and that's what happens. Hey, we were talking about Terrell Williams. Here it is right here. Here was Mike Vrabel asked about his DC, his guy from his Tennessee days, Terrell Williams.
Yeah, that's the plan. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be the defensive coordinator. He's going to call defenses, and, you know, he's an aggressive-minded coach that's coached really aggressive defensive linemen. That's his background. And so I've enjoyed the process of what he's learned when he's gone to Detroit, what he learned with us in Tennessee, to be able to tie the back end together with the stuff that we want to do with the front, and those conversations that have been going on in the last couple weeks since everybody's been together.
Super aggressive defensive lineman with combine workouts kicking off at D-linemen and linebackers. We'll be talking about the D-line prospects in just a few minutes, but I love that he lays that out. That's my guy. He coaches super aggressive defensive linemen. That, like, he just basically maps it out to be just straight up about it as much as possible of, that's my dude. He's aggressive-minded. He coaches aggressive defensive linemen. And that's what it gets into, too, of, like, he gives us a peek behind the curtain, which you watch the tape on Terrell Williams, you know what he wants. But aggressive defensive lineman is, again, going away from what it's looked like for D linemen for the Patriots the last 23, 24 years. Because Gerard Mayo kept that same type of defense, even though he wanted to be more aggressive with blitzes.
Well, he's a Belichick disciple.
No more
right?
3-4, man. It's 4-down linemen. Those are your disruptors. Those are wide 9 alignments. And that's what's encouraging to hear, though, of just how much he backs it up. And it's beyond that, Trav. He was also asked about like the simple thing of you're giving someone the title of passing game coordinator. Mm-hmm. And he said, I think a lot of times we want people to have a clearly defined role. If they excel in that role, we give them more things to do. You have loyalty and a trust to it. Those are ways to reward individuals. You have your role. This is your position group you're coaching. You go do that. If you do great, I'm going to give you more. And guess what? You either grow here or you go somewhere else and you get paid.
Sure.
But that's how he builds out having assistant coaches that want to coach for him. And even asked about how big his staff is, he basically said, yeah, well, we want to make sure we're efficient. We want to identify quality control coaches because we have bigger practice squads. And he said the simple thing, T, which goes back to day one of him being introduced. He goes, I don't want guys coaching here till midnight and being back at 4 a.m. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy for the individual. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy for their families. And it's not healthy for our players because they don't get us operating at the highest possible level. Yeah. This is a guy that gets it, man. Yeah. That's what's so encouraging. He gets it. We all knew it. And you hear it. Let's see the actions. But the actions also were with filling out the defense, T.
Yeah, no doubt. And listen, I remember you and I going live here on NESN for Mike Vrabel's introductory press conference. And one of the things we both keyed in on, George, was I think the question was, like, what did you learn? What was the biggest lesson you learned from Tennessee that you're bringing here now as a head coach? And he talked about the relationships. And so just hearing you kind of go into some of these things that you like about Vrabel's culture is really what you're talking about as it pertains to Terrell Williams and the coaching staff. Listen, I think when Vrabel talks about my relationships with players, coaches, media needs to be better this time around than it was in Tennessee, I don't think it's coinky-dink that Terrell Williams, who's his guy, comes in here and gets this position. That is, George, literally the definition of a relationship. That's one of his guys.
Yep.
So I think it's going to work out. I can't wait to see it, and that's why I'm going back to this. I'm just repeating myself in this episode, but I truly believe they are going to focus on the trenches here, offensive line and defensive line, and that's smart. And I don't think it always has to necessarily be the shiny object on the outside. You don't, to use a car analogy that we used at the top of the show, George, when Vrabel was talking earlier, you don't necessarily need a convertible in a sports car right now. You need a bunch of, I think, would you say an Escalade? Like you need a bunch of SUVs. You may just need that durability this offseason.
Yeah.
And then next offseason, we get the Lambo, right? But for now, like I just like this. And the relationship with Terrell Williams that's already built.
Yeah.
He comes to New England trying to improve on relationships across the board. Genius. I mean, this whole thing from Vrabel, from introductory press conference that I brought up to this, what we got today. This guy, I mean, he hasn't struck out yet.
It's consistent.
He is knocking him out of Fenway, brother.
Yep.
Every time he talks.
It's consistent.
It is.
The prior guy would say something on Sunday at 4 p.m. and walk it back Monday at 8 a.m.
Man, amen. Preach.
This guy's consistent. You know what's big, Trav? Before we get to the talking about the D-line prospects, didn't mention Elliott Wolf a single time.
Sure did.
Which is interesting because during his first go-arounds, introductory presser.
Sure did.
Introductory interview on the radio.
Yeah.
Elliott Wolf.
Yeah.
Elliott Wolf. Didn't mention him once.
No, he didn't.
And again, that says to me, this is me. I'm giving you guys the answers.
Yes.
If it was Gerard, when I get with Elliott Wolf, this is what we'll do.
Yeah.
No. It's all him.
Wolf would have talked. Kraft would have talked. You would have talked. I would have talked.
It's all him.
With Vrabel, it's all Vrabes.
Last one that he mentioned that point that I like too.
Yep.
And we'll do this right before we get D-line prospects in just a minute, which I do like. He was asked about the input, the collaboration from position coaches and scouts.
Sure.
And he goes, with me being a former position coach, I think this guy will love this guy, scouts will love this guy, and they'll sit there and they'll argue. And he said he loves that. Coaches will have input. They'll evaluate free agents and prospects, put their list together, put it in, and then go from there. So he wants that room where you have a scout and a coach sitting at the table and pointing out why they have guys, what guys they love, why, and then they come together and go, okay, this is the one then.
Yep.
I'm the one that coaches it. You're the one that's scouting. And what info do you have? Here's what I like in a guy, and this is why I love him. And we're going to disagree, but we're going to come to amends, and we're going to move forward through with it.
That's right.